Canadian oil sands are mainly located in the northern part of Alberta and exist in three main formations: the Athabasca, Peace River, and the Cold Lake. Together they represent 1.7 trillion barrels of proven reserves and cover an area of approximately 140,000 square kilometers, or approximately the size of Florida. Oil sand is the combination of sand, water, and bitumen, a heavy/long chain hydrocarbon. It differs from conventional oil in both the method of extraction and the method of refining. Bitumen alone does not have much economic value, as it must be refined into more preferable or smaller chain carbons. There are two main methods of doing this. One is through the catalytic cracking and reformation techniques at a refinery equipped to handle heavier crudes, and the other is to be sent to an upgrader where it takes the bitumen and converts it to synthetic crude. Synthetic crude has many of the same characteristics as conventional crude found in southern Alberta and other parts of the world, and thus is able to be refined in refineries currently existing in Canada. In order for oil sand to be recovered from the ground, two primary techniques are employed. The first method of extraction is surface mining. These operations account for only about 20% of the oil currently extracted. This process is only used for reserves close enough to the surface to be effectively mined in an open pit. Large machinery is used to collect the oil sand and bring it to a central location for conditioning and separation, resulting in a pure bitumen product which is diluted and then shipped. The other method is known as in situ extraction. Although used in the remaining 80% of current operations, over 97% of proven reserves in the Canadian oil sands must be extracted through in situ methods. There are many different types of in situ extraction techniques to remove bitumen. However, the primary goal of all techniques is to heat the bitumen up to a temperature in which its viscosity is low enough to be pumped from the ground. Different subsurface formations favor different techniques. However, currently SAGD, or steam-assisted gravity drainage, is the method used primarily. SAGD uses two parallelly drilled horizontal wells. The upper well pumps steam into the formation to help heat up and liberate the bitumen. The bitumen then flows downward into the lower well, where it's pumped to the surface. With the size and scope of the oil sands operation in Canada, it should be no surprise that the environmental impact of this process is also significant. Canada's oil sands account for approximately 8.5% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions, or 0.12% of the global share. They represent the fastest growing source of emissions in Canada, largely due to expansion operations. 70 to 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from the combustion of the fuel, versus the 20 to 30% due to the extraction of the fuel. In this separation process of removing sand and water from the mined bitumen, large amounts of water are produced that have toxic contaminants and fine particulates. This water is then left to settle out the silt in large tailings ponds, as it takes a long time. A recent federal study has confirmed suspicions that some of these toxic chemicals have been leaching into groundwater in the nearby Athabasca River. It is estimated that flow from a single tailings pond is approximately 6.5 million liters per day into the Athabasca River. Mining operations in particular are hugely disruptive to the land used in these operations. Mining operations, however, are limited in the resources in which this method can be implemented. The surface mineable area currently covers 4,700 square kilometers, of which 813 square kilometers have already been cleared. Tailings ponds alone take up 77 square kilometers by themselves. According to federal regulation, all land used in surface mining operations must be reclaimed. Thus far, however, only 82 square kilometers are under active reclamation. The oil sands currently produce about 3 million barrels of oil per day. Canada's national oil consumption is approximately 1.9 million. Canada's refineries cannot process bitumen, and thus all non-upgraded bitumen is shipped out of the country. Thus, most of Canada's oil from the oil sands is exported through the use of pipelines and rail transportation to terminals that either go overseas or mainly south through international pipelines to the US. The energy sector alone accounted for over 22% of Alberta's GDP in 2012, or about 6% of the national GDP. Oil sands currently affects the job of 112,000 people across Canada. This number is expected to grow to over 500,000 jobs over the next 25 years. Also over the next 25 years, oil sands are expected to contribute $1.5 trillion in taxes, plus an additional $200 billion in capital expenditure and $350 billion in royalties.